Alright, so let's read this by Darren Allen. I don't know who that is, but it's talking about the limits of literalism. Alright, this is the first few pages of Self and Unself. ExpressiveEgg.org. Don't know what that is. A bit hard as a foundations have to be, which explains the catastrophic limitations of what I define as literalism. Alright, it is something you define.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
The root worldview which has governed our civilization for 10 millennia. 10 millennia? A millennia is 1,000 years, right? So 10,000 years. Was that too loud? I think the music is fine. Alright. The root worldview, this sounds exciting. And which has manifested as various branches. Theism, atheism, dualism, monoism, subjectivism, objectivism, idealism, and realism, which appear to be antagonistic opposites, but which are fundamentally the same. Only when the common thread between all these lies is identified can the truth in radical opposition to it be understood. That's very interesting. Theism, actually, I'm a little bit curious. What does that even mean? Theism, like, isn't that just belief in the existence of God or gods? And atheism is the non-belief of a god or gods. Right? It's just, that's how it's defined, right? It's just not a belief. So, but he's saying, like, this text is making the statement that these all are the same. Alright, it's literally taking... These are not opposites, I would not say, but dualism and monism, those are not opposites either, but they are different viewpoints, right? Dualism being the Cartesian thing about body and soul. Monism saying that everything exists in the same realm of reality. Either we are spiritual beings or we are physical beings. I don't know, like, it says there is one reality, or this one says that there are two realities. Subjectivism and objectivism. Alright, that is that, that's epistemological ideas, if I understand correctly, about knowledge, right? Subjectivism stating that, well, every time we look at the world, we'll see it through subjective eyes. And that, I mean, that's pretty much agreed upon, right? Like from a science perspective, that, yeah, everything you see from your own eyes. You cannot experience the thing in itself. Right, from a philosophical standpoint. But objectivism can still be... It's a goal, right? It's kind of like pragmatism. Like, if everybody sees the same thing, then we can say that... We can say something about the objective reality. If all the subjective... Isn't that kind of the basis of statistical science, right? If everybody sees the same thing, we can say that, like, pragmatically, that is how the objective world works. Even though we're not necessarily saying that is actually how the objective world works, we can say, from the point of view from a human, since all humans see the same thing, we can say that right? Just to draw the lines somewhere, right? Between subjectivism and objectivism, to be able to talk about it pragmatically. Maybe. Blasphemous. Good luck at getting everyone to see the same thing, even if it's there, Kappa. I mean, we all see gravity, right? We all experience gravity. Right? That. If you don't experience gravity, then float the fuck away, to paraphrase Tim Minchin. Right? But that is something that's in the subjective experience of everybody, gravity is a thing, right? That is when I think of objectivism, that is, I would say maybe modern objectivism. I don't know. But yeah, exactly. That was my point, indeed. That it is always a subjective. It is always the eye of the beholder that sees anything, right? That was my whole point. Idealism and realism. That is interesting. Blasphemous says, I bet I can find people that will refuse to see it. I mean, they will refuse to claim to experience it. Sure, you can find people to refuse to claim to see that. But they are not floating around, right? When they jump, they will fall down, and that will be their experience, falling to the ground. That will be their experience. Even if they lie and say that was not their experience, it is still their experience. And that is how I mean we can reach objectivism, right? Did I say everybody? That was dumb of me, yeah. That's a good point. If I said everybody, I should have said most people. Alright, idealism and realism. And that's also a different worldview, right? That's, again, idealism is the... If I recall, idealism is that math exists, like actually exists. While realism says that, no, the actual physical world exists, and the abstractions we make are only those we make. I kind of feel like a lot of these was kind of resolved with Immanuel Kant. I kind of feel like the problem between these has been philosophically resolved. Maybe that's just my opinion and I got convinced by Immanuel Kant. Blasphemous. Then how can we, when there will always be people to refuse to acknowledge things? Then how can we science reach some sort of objectivism? Right. That's why... right, my understanding, right? If you want to... Actually, I would probably not even talk about objectivism as a thing. But right, we can make statements about the common experiences of people, right? If you take 1,000 people and one person rejects seeing something, right? If 1,000 people say, well, we all see this, and one person say, well, I don't see that, then we can make like a statistical thing that where we can say most people see this, and then you can note the objections, the refusals, you can note them, but you can also continue living your life like this is how the world works. Where the 999 people, what they said, you can take for, Like, right? You make, what is that called? Assumptions? Yeah. You make assumptions about how the world works. And you can't, like, if you don't do that, if you don't do assumptions about how the world works, how are you supposed to be an agent in the world? If you have no idea how nothing works, this is just a way for people. It's a methodology, right? It's a methodology that I'm talking about now. It's a methodology on how you can be the best you can be. Like, you can figure out how your world works by using other people's knowledge, right? It's a collaboration on building a world view. Blasphemous says something like 90% of the world is spiritual and religious. Yeah. And that, I can say then, well, human beings tend to be spiritual religious. Right? I'm talking from a scientific point of view here, right? That's my approach to objectivism, like trying to reach objectivism. I concede and agree that it's an impossibility to reach like true objectivism. But it is an approach that I find pragmatically useful to have, like, if I do this, I see that. Right? I don't know if 90% of these people would be claiming to have seen God and actually talked to their gods, or if it's more like abstract than that, right? All of these spiritual religious people, would they claim to have... They wouldn't claim to have scientific proof, like some of them would. Philosophical proof, maybe. But that, I mean, that's another way to look at the world. Blasphemous says, my point is you are never going to get a lot of people to see something, even if it is or isn't there. Yeah. I mean, sure, I agree with that. That people see different things, of course. But my point still stands that, like, everybody is gonna experience gravity similarly, right? If they jump down, they're gonna have the experience of falling down. Maybe even hurting themselves, right? And yeah. You don't need magic to explain those things and say that, well, this happens for everybody. I can say that. I can feel fairly certain that every person in the world that jumps up will fall down. I can be certain about that thing. And we call that a fact, right? Call that a fact, that people who jump up will fall down, and I'm gonna build my worldview, my understanding of the world is gonna be built around that fact, right? Even if you can find thousands, millions of people that say, well, I don't fall down when I jump up. And what I say then, show me, is what I say. I say, show me. And I suppose, like, do I need to convince these other people, right? Maybe they actually, like, from their point of view, they are not falling down. And I would say that that is probably, like, a misunderstanding of language rather than a different experience of reality. But let's say that, like, there was a different experience of reality. that is just not the reality, like the religious people, right? They can see the voice of God, or, well, they can see God working in all things, and that is their experience of reality. And that's a different methodology of building a worldview, and that's their subjective experience. And me and that religious people will not have the same experience. And I think that's like fine. I would argue that my way of looking at things is better, just like the religious person would argue that their way of looking at the world is better. And I think that argument is a worthwhile argument to have. Right? That's kind of the right, since I don't think anyone is actually arguing objectivism, philosophically speaking, anymore. Right? Because I think most philosophical, maybe as a practice, but not sincerely, I think most people just have to concede to subjectivism, right? And therefore, right, since it's all subjective, then it's, if you want to find a common ground of how we describe the world and how the world works, the only way to reach it is through argumentation, right? And agreement. It's a negotiation between people. Yeah, it's always a negotiation between people. And I have been convinced about different methodologies how to build my idea about the outside world, how it works. And I'm happy to argue those things. And some people, like religious people, saying that God created this whole business 6,000 years ago, that is just not enough to convince me. Just like my point of view is not enough to convince them. Yeah. Right. I guess I would probably fall into the realm of realism here, but I don't know. Blasphemous says, it is terrifying how many people are religious/spiritual. I think there are some things, some consequences of that thing that bothers me. Yeah. There are some things that bothers me with that. But I'm not afraid of a religious person just because they are religious. If I'm afraid of people, it's for other reasons than being religious. Like, I'm more afraid of religious organizations more than I am of actual religious people. Most of the religious people I've met, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, have been nice people. Yeah, they've been nice people, friendly people. They didn't mean me any harm. Right? A lot of them thought that I was going to hell, but they would prefer me not going to hell, right? They would see me as misguided, not as an enemy. They wouldn't be hostile towards me just because of that religious, spiritual reason, right? People have been hostile, of course, but for other reasons. Blasphemous, that is proof enough. I shouldn't take most people serious. Yeah, I mean, if 90% of the world is... I mean, I don't mind spirituality. I'm not very spiritual myself, but I don't mind spirituality. But I wouldn't take a binary stance like that. Just because someone has... Right, if we're talking about, like, politics and ethics, then for me, then yeah, that would be lowering the bar. Like, remember we talked about the rhetorics, right? We got ethos, logos, and pathos. For me, if someone is religious, that lowers their ethos like a big deal. but they can still move me emotionally or logically, right? So it lowers my capability of listening to a person. If they are religious, it lowers my possibility, but I wouldn't throw them out necessarily because of it. Depends on what else they are saying, right? This is one thing, and it definitely, like you, right? Start taking them less serious, but not necessarily. All right, so what I was thinking about how, in my mind, these have been resolved, right? From my worldview, these have been resolved, philosophically speaking. That, right, dualism is that you do have an internal world, right? That's your subjective experience. But there has to be an outside world as well to give rise, like you are looking at something. You are experiencing something. Something exists outside of you, right? Even if you are the god of this reality and you created everything, there is still a dualistic experience to the thing, right? Because, as we said, right, I don't experience what it's like to be you. I don't experience what it's like to be my favorite example, the big glass here, right? It is outside of my realm of experience. I experience it from my point of view. So there is a dualism there. Philosophically speaking, it could all be generated from me, but it's still dualistic. Essentially, right? And the similar thing goes here, right? It follows then that, yeah, there is an objective world. Even if you created said world, you do not have access to it because you, as an individual, you experience something. So there is your experience, and it is the thing in itself. Right. And then we come to the idea that ideal, like, let's say unicorns. Unicorns do exist in my mind, even though they might not exist in the outside world. Right? That's the Kantian dualism again, right? So to me, they do not appear to be antagonistic opposites, no. Some of them appear antagonistic, yes. Right? You can take that stance if you want to argue these all against each other, but you don't have to. And that's kind of the point, right? They appear to be antagonistic. I disagree that they appear to be opposites. Right? Monism, that would be pluralism, would be the opposite of monism, right? No, not even that. I would say that these are only degrees. That's like 1, that's that 2, or you can have more. So I would say nonism, if that's a thing, right? That would be the opposite, right? These all talk about how reality exists, and the opposite would be reality not existing. But I guess that's a little bit of a straw man saying that. I kind of get what text is coming from, right? When they say opposites. It's just, I'm very literal, so I'm saying, no, they're not opposites. Alright. They appear to be, but which are fundamentally the same. Alright, we still haven't gotten to what literalism is. I'm still curious. Only when the common thread between all these lies... Wait, all these... Right, Darren Allen here. Like, the text is claiming that all of these are lies, which is an interesting word to use. And I find that a little bit off-putting. Because, well, no, it's fine. I can let that slide for now. Right. When the common thread is identified, then can the truth in radical opposition to it be understood. Alright, so I think from that I'm kind of in agreement, right? Where I was saying the opposite of this is something else. So it's... Alright. Introduction. It's an excerpt. Okay. Ego made this world. Ego and the world are each a metaphor for the other, with a common origin which, when consciously experienced, can free the individual self from both. Alright. Alright. Why did you have to use that word without defining it? I suppose you are going to define it, because I don't understand this, because I don't understand. What do you mean when you say ego? What do you mean when you say the world? And how are they this? They are a metaphor for the other. I mean, I guess we're not talking psychology here. I'm guessing we're talking about the self. That is my guess. Right? That everything that goes on inside me goes on. I have metaphors for what goes on outside of me. And I would agree to that point, right? That's subjectivism, right? That is literally subjectivism, that I create and interpret the world. So therefore, the world is just a metaphor that exists in my mind. And my mind only exists as a metaphor for the world. I am confused. And free the individual self from both. Alright. This experience is neither objective nor subjective. It is what I call panjective, which means it can neither be literally described nor solipsistically moodied up, only gestures towards by critically exploring what it is not and by metaphorically describing what it is like. This is what the present work does. Alright, what does this mean? Alright, solipsistic, of, relating to, or characterized by solipsism or extreme egocentricity. Alright. So, described is objective. I'm not sure I understand. Because that seems like... Or, I mean... It seems like this is not a rejection of these things. Like... Yeah, it doesn't seem like a rejection. It seems like... The reality is somewhere in between, and isn't that always the case? You take extreme stances in philosophy, right, like these, and take them to their edges of logic. I don't know. But I think, like, from when I studied philosophy, that was a long time ago, but from what I remember is that when you study philosophy, you study subjectivism and you study objectivism, and then you compare the two and try to figure out, what do you think? I mean, I suppose an experience would be, you could go the objective route, like if it's panjective, if it's both and neither, right? If it's neither, it's both. And objectivism, like objective reality, right? I know exactly what it means to be me, right? That is the experience that I have, and that experience exists objectively. But it feels like I'm making a mistake because I'm trying to shoehorn in objectivism and subjectivism in a text where it says to reject both ideas, and I try to just shoehorn them in. Right, which means it can neither be literally described, which I'm okay with, right? Because language is inherently, what's that word again? Oh, whatever, right? But I'm okay with that. Only gestures towards. By critically exploring what it is not, and by metaphorically describing what it is like. This is what the present work does. I mean, that makes sense to me, I guess. It's still a little bit confusing, but philosophy tends to be, right? To put this another way, thank you. Reality is ultimately mysterious. Yes, a mystery that is everywhere you look, because it is that which is looking. I mean, ultimately, yeah, right? That's why we have curiosity, right? From the point of view of a person, reality is mysterious, right? We don't know what the fuck is going on. Yeah. Which is kind of right. If you don't know what's going on, it's a mystery, right? So yeah, it's a mystery everywhere you look, because it is that which is looking. That thing I don't understand. Oh, right. Yeah. The looking is part of reality. The looking and the looking, the seeing, and the things are all parts of reality. Okay. I don't see how that has to be an argument. I would say I agree that it's mysterious. Alright. Right. Like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, did it make a sound? Right? If you take that kind of view, right? If no one is around to looking at it, there is no mystery, right? Because no one cares. If no one cares, there is no mystery. Because no one is looking. And it's just mysterious because you are looking. But the mystery... Actually, isn't that just subjectivism? Fuck. I'm stuck in subjectivism again, it seems. Alright. This doesn't mean that unmysterious thought, the kind that reason about subjective impressions and objective things, is useless. Indeed. Or that the facts that it handles are illusions. I mean, even if they are illusions, they are consistent illusions, right? That's the whole point with facts, right? It doesn't matter if they are illusions, they are consistent. The illusion of gravity happens over and over and over and over again. Therefore, we might as well say that, well...
You know why they put oxygen masks on planes? So you can breathe. Oxygen gets you high.
Deep breath, yeah. It means that such thought reaches a limit beyond which it cannot pass. Something else has to cross over. a something else, which obviously enough cannot be expressed with the thought it had to leave behind. Alright, unmysterious thought. Reasons about subjective impressions and objective things. And such thoughts that are unmysterious reaches a limit. Yeah, that's the subjectivist limit, right? Yeah, that is the subjectivist limit that you reach and cannot pass through. Yeah. Something else has to cross over, something else which obviously enough cannot be expressed with the thought that it has to leave behind. That I don't understand. What do you mean crossover? It kind of seems like it has to originate from somewhere, crossing over from one to another. Can't they just be separate things? Blasphemous. Unmysterious thought. Hot tub girl. Thought. Those are pronounced pretty much the same. Thought and thought. Thought and thought, maybe. I find it quite mysterious. No, actually, no. Not very mysterious. I was kind of thinking that it doesn't sound like something I would enjoy spending my time doing, sitting in a hot tub for hours on end. Just because I don't want to do it doesn't make it mysterious, not really. Except, like, if you want to go... Where was it? Ultimately, right? It's ultimately mysterious, right? Because if you talk ultimately, it's like you have to go, then why, and why, and why, and why, and why. And like, you end up with questions. That's the philosophically what you're doing, right? It becomes ultimately mysterious because why is life? Why is there something rather than nothing? Right? Ultimately, if you just go down the rabbit hole of asking why questions, you will end up in an ultimately mysterious situation. While that... Oh. Ultimately, stuff is mysterious because we don't have perfect knowledge. There it is. Oh, and there we go. I get it now. To get perfect knowledge, something would have to cross over. Alright. And that's an impossibility, right? If it does think or reason or attempt to express itself, it has to do it in another way. Through the means of expression we call a metaphor. Yeah. And again, this is what this book's aim to do. Right, I think I'm getting a grasp of what's going on. It's still a little bit confusing to me. Alright. There is a self here reading these words, which I call me. Okay? It is a caused, three-dimensional fact existing in what I call space and passing through or changing in what I call time. It's a caused, three-dimensional fact. Sure, I'm okay with this. The purpose of the self is to generate the world for me from the world in itself. Oh, look at that. Literally quoting Immanuel Kant. Purpose of the self is to generate the world for me from the world in itself. Alright. I mean, this I remember reading this in other words when reading about the brain, like neuropsychology. Neuropsychology is very interesting, I recommend it. But I remember it was about... Fuck, I don't have that book here anymore. I wonder if I can just look for that information. About the principles of the brain. 11 principles brain. I wonder if I can find these. No, not hacks. Not persuasion. Neuropsychology. Maybe if I read. I think it was 11 principles. Fuck, it was years ago. Oh, it doesn't matter. But one of the principles that I do remember now because it's relevant was that the job of the brain... No, a job. There we go. One job of the brain is to create the world and to make interpretations of it. So I would be okay with this if you change the into a. A purpose of the self is to generate a world for me from the world in itself, right? It observes the world. That is one thing that the self does. But the self does other things, right? It can observe itself as well. Right? Like dreams are not generated from the world in itself in the same way. So a purpose. But I'm okay with one purpose, and I'm okay with focusing on said purpose. Yeah. The experienced world of the self is not of reality as it actually is, but is an image or reflection of reality, a representation or a manifestation of something else. Yeah. That's what I thought. This is all Immanuel Kant. Yeah. That's my response I had over here, right? It's just the same thing. Yeah. It is the experience and the thing in itself. Blasphemous. Propaganda makes it easy to convince a lot of people something really is objective. Propaganda is a... What is the definition of propaganda? Isn't that just propaganda? Congregation? No, not that. The spreading of ideas, information, or rumor of the purpose or helping or injuring an institution or a cause or a person. Propaganda makes it easy to convince a lot of people. You don't have to use the word propaganda there. It doesn't fit. You can just say it is easy to convince a lot of people something really is objective. Yeah, because it is easy to convince people about many things. It is raining outside. It's not. I was lying. You knew it because of the situation we're in, but if we didn't talk about it and I lied to you and said that it's raining outside, you would have no reason, right? You don't have to talk about propaganda. It's just how we people are. It is easy to convince people about something or another. Lasma says propaganda is an important word. It is an important word, but in the context, I don't understand why you use it in the context. right? You can consider it, right? When you convince a lot of people something really is objective, you can consider that propaganda. But it's not what makes it easy to convince people. You can consider said thing propaganda. That makes a lot more sense to me. Right? You can spread those ideas. I suppose, alright. What you mean are like propaganda strategies makes it easy. That was probably my misunderstanding. Yeah, you can use strategies that are used in propaganda to convince people. Blasphemous says, because propaganda is how you convince the masses something is happening or not happening. Alright, that I don't agree with. How you convince the masses of something is through rhetorics. And you can consider rhetorics to be propaganda. But, alright. We have different definitions of this word, right? For me, propaganda is the spreading of the idea. Like, I like this definition. The spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person. Yeah, if you have this kind of cause, well, I suppose that kind of makes everything propaganda, right? Any idea that you spread, any information, any rumor. Right? Because what would be the purpose? Otherwise, it kind of feels, if everything is propaganda, nothing is propaganda. That's the feeling I get. Blasphemous says almost everything is propaganda. So maybe it's better to define what is not propaganda then. What is not propaganda? Also, I think that weakens the word. In my view, that weakens the word. I wish propaganda to be a stronger word. Blasphemous is once you train yourself to spot it. I mean, from this definition, right? I mean, the spreading of ideas is always... I mean, you always have a reason, and that reason might be helping or injuring someone or thing. That person can be yourself, right? So give me an example of something that is not propaganda. So I can, like, we draw a line somewhere. To draw a line somewhere, I need a line somewhere, otherwise the word is pointless to me. Yeah, I need a line. A line in the sand. What is it not? What's this? Xbox Cloud Gaming. xCloud rolls out to everyone and it works on Linux. I don't like cloud gaming, it sucks. Yeah, cloud gaming... I tried that for a bit, right, before I got this computer. With the NVIDIA... Yeah, I tried the NVIDIA one. And I tried the Steam one as well. And it just... It's not quick enough. And you get like that graininess that makes it... It feels sluggish. Yeah. You get bad graphics. But you get another point of failure in the graphics that makes it look weird. And sluggish with the controls. I think it's, I mean, I guess it's good that they're working on it, and I can imagine that in the future, that this will be the future of gaming. Yeah, where you put your games on a computer somewhere else, and then you just play from, like, you have a machine that doesn't have to run the things. Like, you play from a supercomputer. I don't know. Blasphemous says, it is nice that it works on Linux. Indeed, it is great that it works on Linux. Especially, for, like, I think it's great for a lot of people. And a lot of games are just fine, right? a lot of games are just fine. You can play a lot of games just fine. And if you don't have the access to an expensive computer that I have, then it's better than nothing, right? If you want to do gaming, it is better than nothing, definitely. Alright. No definition of what propaganda is not? Right. Then I'm just gonna stick with the way that you use the word. Is just pointless to me, right? Because if everything is propaganda, nothing is propaganda. Then it's just communication, right? Then it's just a synonym for communication. But it has propaganda has this negative undertone for me. Communication is more broadly just neutral, so I would prefer using the word communication. Lasma says it depends on what games you're playing. Definitely depends on what games you're playing, yeah. Lasma says, if everything is propaganda, then everything is propaganda. Yeah. And then I might as well use the word communication, right? I prefer the word communication, if that's the case. Because it's just a synonym. Lasma says, modern propaganda should be considered negative. But that's the thing, right? If everything everyone always says is propaganda, then it's just communication. And right, if you say that all that is negative, that's a dark way to look at the world, right? That's kind of bleak, right? If everything everyone always says is negative, I can't get behind that statement, right? Because then, like, if everything is negative, well, then I don't know. I think there are stuff that are good, and there are stuff that are bad. If everything is bad, then that's weird. And that seems like a broken bias. It seems like it's time for some dopamine detox. Yeah. If everything sucks all the time, yeah, that sounds like it's time for dopamine detox, because that sounds like a mental unhealth rather than talking about anything else than going on in the world. It kind of yeah. That makes sense. Lasmus says the old type of propaganda was more about informing people about helpful things. The old type of propaganda? What do you mean when you say old type? Isn't the whole propaganda etymology? Like, my understanding is that it comes from Nazis, right? Maybe not? No, I was completely misunderstanding. Noun. Committee of Cardinals. Oh, right, it was the first definition. It was the first definition of the thing. It was a noun. Let's see. Etymology. From New Latin, propaganda, short for Congregation for Propagating the Faith. Oh, it was for... Propaganda was literally for spreading religion. I don't know if informing people about helpful things. I mean, I guess the people that does propaganda believe that they do, from my definition of propaganda, right? Propagating ideas, that's the purpose. A committee of cardinals established in 1622 by the Pope to supervise foreign missions and properly ablative feminine gerundive. I don't know, propagate. Modern political sense dates from World War I. Not originally pejorative. Concerted set of messages aimed at influencing the opinions or behavior of a large number of people. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. I would say most communication is not propaganda. I like that. Large numbers of people. influencing the opinions or behavior of. Yeah. I like that. Actually, this is probably my favorite definition so far. Modern propaganda is used to brainwash and manipulate. The purpose of propaganda is, right, it is to congregate, no, wait, where is it? Propagating faith, propagating ideas. And that could be, right, that could be done through brainwashing and manipulation. Sure. Those are methods to achieve propaganda. It doesn't have to be, right? Lasmus's example of good old propaganda: cover your mouth when you cough so it doesn't spread germs. It's, yeah, a concerted set of messages aimed at influencing the behavior of a large number of people. Good old propaganda. I mean, that's... Right. That's the old type of propaganda. Concerted, like, yeah, intentional propaganda. I'm okay with that. Yeah, intentional. And that I don't understand how you can say that everything is propaganda, right? I would say most of the things that I say is not... Like, I do a lot of propaganda, sure. Like, I do have the intention of influencing the opinions and behaviors of people. Sure, I do have that, but that's... I think that's the minority of the words that I say in any given year. Yeah, definitely a minority of everything I say. Yeah. And I like this definition. Definitely. How did we get into that? Where were we? All right. Yeah. But I think, right? I think in my mind, when you talk about propaganda, some of it, right? Some of it, I hear rhetorics. The art of persuasion. Right? The methodology of propaganda, right? If you do propaganda well, like talk about the brainwash and manipulate people, you do that through rhetorics, right? You use this. You study these things, and you use these to, manipulate or brainwash, or like, yeah, the art of persuasion. You persuade people, you convince people to do one thing or another. And I suppose you could probably make the claim that every time someone is doing something rhetorically, you could probably... Yeah, that is always propaganda. I would agree to that, right? Because the whole point is to persuade, like, that is your point. That is the intent of the speaker or writer or whatever. Yeah. But propaganda can even be broader than this, right? Because cover your mouth when you cough. Oh, well, so it doesn't spread germs. But you can also... No, that would still be rhetorics. I was thinking that I could leave rhetorics behind and still call something propaganda. And I guess it is possible to do that. Yeah, I think so. I just don't know how at the moment. Oh, a parent raising their kids. That's not rhetorics. You're not trying to persuade your kids to cover your mouth when you cough. The parent just says to the child, cover your mouth when you cough or else. Right? It is not about persuasion. That is about brainwashing more, right? Cover your mouth when you cough. You don't need to persuade. And would that be considered propaganda as well? I suppose it would, yeah. Because you're influencing the behaviors. Actually, it's just for one person, so it's not propaganda. No, the propaganda would have to be persuading. It would be the propaganda would be to get all parents to teach children to cover their mouths. So what the parent does is not propaganda. The propaganda is what makes the parent do that thing. Which is persuading the parent to do such a thing. Blasphemous says, I get bored when we get stuck on words. I mean, you were saying something that didn't make sense to me. I had to make sense of it. Right? Otherwise, it's just a misunderstanding left behind. I'm sorry it makes you bored, but it happens, right? It was... what's that called? It was a bottleneck to understanding. Blasphemous says, then it just goes in circles. I disagree, I feel done with it. For me it did not go in circles. Maybe for you it did. For you it went in circles. Because you were not the one who did the misunderstanding. Right? I was misunderstanding what you were talking about. And I can imagine it goes in circles from your point of view, but from mine it did not. There was a progression. Alright. There's something else that... wait. Manifestations of something else. Alright, yeah, the thing in itself, the outside world. Blasphemous. Alright. In the 20th century, the term propaganda was often associated with a manipulative approach, but historically propaganda has been a neutral descriptive term. Yeah. I mean, it was still... right? They were spreading the faith. That was the origin, right? I think that it makes sense that it was added. Because I think that the strategies being used were inherently manipulative. But manipulative doesn't necessarily mean bad. In my opinion, anyway. Right, this is something else that representations and manifestations are of is inaccessible to the self. Yeah. It appears to the self either as an unfathomable distal context beyond objective representations, or it appears as an unfathomable proximal consciousness behind the self-experience. Alright, this was confusing. I get this first point, right? It is inaccessible to the self. That's the whole point of subjectivism, right? It appears to the self as an unfathomable distal context. I don't know what this word means. Distal? Anatomically located far from the point of reference, such as an origin or a point of attachment. So it's similar to distant. It appears to the self either as an unfathomable distal context beyond objective representation. Yeah, right. You cannot do objective representation, right? Because it's too far off. Yeah. Or it appears as an unfathomable proximal consciousness behind the self-experience. That I didn't think. Isn't that too close? Proximity is like, yeah, nearest, proximate. This last bit confuses me. Right? The experience of the world, of the self, is not of reality, but is an image or a reflection of reality. Yeah, a representation or manifestation of something else. And that something else is beyond the objective representation. Yeah, right, it's too far off. How can it be too close? Isn't the closest thing your experience? Right? The self-experience is the closest thing, no? Proximal consciousness? I mean, I suppose, like, if you go... Right, if you say that the world is infinite, stretching outwards and stretching inwards, right? I've heard that said before, like that the inside can go infinite. You have infinite stuff to explore inside yourself, right? It is never ending. That's the experience. And so, like, behind, like, if you go closer and closer and closer, there is no language to explain it. I kind of assume that is where the text is going, right? That there are stuff, right? What the self is and how the self is experienced things is... It's not the same as the words, right? Right. The self, in other words, does not and cannot know who I really am or what anything really is. Alright, and the self is... Alright, we're talking about the spiritual experience here. Yeah, the spiritual sense of the consciousness and what consciousness is. Yeah, we don't experience an objective version of that. We don't experience... This all sounds a lot like subjectivism to me, again. Self can only know its own medial experience. Self can only know its medial experience. Anything else, if there is anything else, is beyond or behind a wall which the self cannot surmount.
I'm a leaf on the wind.
I have never experienced how it feels for a neuron to fire, right? It is behind a wall. I have never experienced how a thought is constructed. That is probably better, right? I've never experienced how it is to be water. I've never experienced how one of my thoughts was built. So it's kind of like there is a limit, right, to reality. There's a whole spectrum of things that happens in reality. There happens a lot of stuff inside the consciousness, inside the subjective, and there happens a lot of outside of the consciousness, the objective. And there is not like a black and white border, but there is a range in where we can experience the thing. Similar to like the visible spectrum, right? Of vibrations, right? There is a visible or an auditory spectrum of vibrations, right? We have a range where we can experience stuff. And outside, in both ends, those are not accessible experiences to us. Blasphemous says, I think this guy writes in a vague way to leave it up to whatever the reader wants to interpret. Yes. I am hoping that it is following the time glass model. It kind of feels like it's following the time glass model. Right? And then we start out vague, and then we go and narrow in. It feels like that. But then you start out vague, right? Because at the start I had no idea what was going on, right? You start big, very big, and then you narrow in, narrow in, narrow in. But I do agree, right? A lot of the words being used are not defined. Right? Self is not defined. Something else, super vague. But since I've read Immanuel Kant, like this whole thing... Well, yeah, this whole thing is just paraphrasing Immanuel Kant. Yeah. So maybe that is my interpretation, but this is the exactly the language that was used in Immanuel Kant. Blasphemous consciousness. I hate that fucking word. Oh, what's wrong with it? Consciousness. Right? Now, just because you said that, we're gonna get stuck on the word for a little bit. Super happy, right? Consciousness, as its simplest, is the sentience or awareness of internal and external existence. It's awareness. It's just a synonym for awareness. It has way too many meanings. Oh. Alright, yeah. Operationalize. But I think we're moving in a direction, right? We're using self and consciousness behind the self-experience. So I think it is kind of operationalized, but it is... I kind of feel that that's kind of the point of the text, right? That the idea that we're trying to express with this word is super difficult to grasp. Kind of the point. Blasphemous says, I've heard people use it in so many ways. Yeah, it definitely has been used in many ways. And yeah, it is important to operationalize. And I'm just gonna assume here, right? My interpretation, I'm going from my interpretation, right? Maybe we get further into the text and figure out that my interpretation does not hold up, or that I feel that it does not hold up, but then I'll change it. But for now, I feel like there is... Yeah. The feeling I get is that it's just differentiation, right? I think it actually did a good job invoking these, and that we have our experience, and then there's stuff over here, and then there's stuff over here that we don't have access to. And the stuff that leans this way, like dualistically speaking, would be stuff that are called idealistic, subjective, spiritual, consciousness, right? That's the thing over there. And then we have the objective reality, realism, objectivism, monism, and stuff like that over to the other side. And that's my understanding so far of the text. And yeah, it has been very vague, but that is my understanding so far, and I'm assuming that the further we go, the more specific it will be. We will see, though. Let's see, Blasphemous says, then I am like, tell me what you mean when you say consciousness, and they don't tell me. Yeah, exactly. Because of the vagueness. Blasphemous says, I prefer the awareness definition. Me too, yeah. The awareness. When you go, like, the definition I like, because you can say what is unconscious and what is conscious. And the understanding of what happens when you go in for a medical operation and they put you under and there is nothing there, that is being unconscious. Being dead, that's being unconscious. Like, I was unconscious in the 1700s. I like that definition. It's like, it's similar to the differences of being awake and being asleep. But it's a dreamless sleep, right? There is nothing there. That is unconsciousness. Blasphemous says it can be very New Age. Shivers. Oh. Yeah, New Age stuff likes that word, consciousness. Blasphemous says, I was unconscious when I was still ignorant. Oh yeah, you were not conscious. Yeah, I like that. I didn't even think about... I hadn't even thought about it in that sense, but it would... Right? And that's the broadness of the word again. I didn't think about that, but yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not conscious of, right? Stuff that happens outside of my realm of awareness. Right? I am unconscious of what my neighbor is doing right now. But, does that work in this context? Proximal consciousness? Alright. This here kind of feels like the awareness of the internal world, right? We've been talking about awareness of the external world. I think that this is, like, if we want to use that definition and make it work in here, I would say, yeah, awareness of what happens inside the internal world. And that kind of makes sense from my interpretation, right? That I am aware of my thoughts, but I'm not aware of how my thoughts are constructed, right? It is deeper inside of me. It happens inside of me, so it's not inside my consciousness, but it's behind it somehow. So it's not part of consciousness, it's behind. Yeah, proximal. It's too close, too hidden to not be awareness. Maybe? Blasphemous says, you don't want to know what the neighbor does? Yes. Blasphemous says, you can figure it out though? No, my understanding of, like, my interpretation of this is no, that you cannot figure it out. The construction of a thought. That is my understanding of this text. Like, I'm trying not to talk about the experience of neurons firing. I'm trying not to do that because that is talking about the objective world, something distant outside of me, but yeah, like when you meditate, that is one thing, right? You meditate, and then there is a thought that comes into your head, and it's a finished thought, right? You can figure the thought out, right? You can manipulate it, and you can derive it, and what's that called? Wrap it apart and look at its different parts. But you did not experience those parts before the thought arrived in your mind. Right? The thought came prepared, if that makes sense. Dissect. Thank you. Yeah, you can dissect the thought into many different constituent parts. Thank you. That was exactly the word. You can dissect a thought. And you can figure out, you can be correct or not correct in how it was built, right? But that's not the same as the building of the thought in itself. I mean, it's and you can say, well, it's derived on past experiences and past knowledge that you were aware of. But the thought in the now, that were created in the now, like I'm talking a second ago, well, what is it, 7 seconds ago? It takes just a short time for a thought to arise. And I'm talking about that short time just before the thought arose. Not the thing that happened yesterday. Blasphemous says, you cannot figure out how that thought came to be. Yeah, you can. That's what I'm saying. You can dissect it and figure it out, but that is not the same as experience the building of the thought, right? You do that after the fact, not before the fact. If that makes sense. You can definitely figure it out and, well, build a theory, right? You have a hypothesis, you build an idea, and you believe, right? That's why I thought that way. Probably. Right? You can definitely do that. But my understanding of this is, right, not even after you have dissected and figured it out, you don't know, right? You don't know. It's an after construction. It's post hoc. You do that after the fact, not before the fact, because you don't experience the subconscious. There we go. The Freudian subconscious. Stuff happens. Right? For example, you don't know what it's like to make your heart beat. That's a good example, right? You can figure out how it works, and you notice how it starts beating faster when you do one thing, and you notice how it beats slower when you do another thing. But the actual controlling and the beating of the heart, like the actual doing of the thing, is not in your awareness. It is behind it. Subconscious. Below it. Yes, we're talking about subconscious. Exactly. Let's see. Blasphemous says, isn't that how ideas are formed? Yes. You can figure out how it was formed, but you didn't experience the formation, right? Yeah. Blasphemous says, I think that is trying to overcomplicate things where it doesn't matter. We're talking about subconscious. I mean, I don't know if it matters yet. But yeah, subconscious, right? That was my understanding, right? That we have, this is the realm of experience, and on that side we have the objective world, and on this side we have the subconscious. Right? That is the realm of experience. That is kind of the understanding I have of this text, right? It's talking about stuff that is outside the realm of experience in two different directions. Yeah. Subconscious, indeed. And the subconscious from a psychological standpoint, not a neurological or objectal. The subconscious does stuff that is not materialistic, right? We have abstract ideas about them, just like we have abstract ideas about ideas. There we go. Blasphemous is better to use the word subconscious, then it makes more sense as to what we're talking about. Yes, indeed, yeah. When that word came in, it's like, yeah, that is definitely the word to be used. Like sub-awareness. It's like you as a person is aware, but you as it's not part of your experience. like your body can be aware of a lot of things that is not in your conscious experience. Yeah, so subconscious. Oh, yeah. All right. So far, I am enjoying this. I'm excited to see where it leads. It feels like a continuation of Kantian thought, and I do enjoy some Kantian thoughts. Yeah, the Kant thoughts. Lasma says your body can know that you're upset before you are. Yeah, there have been studies, right? Plenty of studies. Your body and your brain has made the decision before you experience the decision making. There has been plenty of studies that has shown that. Lasma says when you have depression and anxiety, that is your body telling you something's wrong. Yeah, usually that's the case, right? It's pain, right? When you feel pain, it's different variations of pain. Pain has a purpose, right? Oh, that fucking shit hurts. That's because you're supposed to stay away from whatever is causing said experience, right? Lasma says people are not always conscious of what those reasons are, though. I would say mostly we are not. I would say that's my guess, that most of the time we are not conscious of whatever is causing. Like physical pain, we get most of the time we get straight on, right? Oh, this knife cut me. That is why I'm hurting. That's pretty straightforward. But mental pain, oof, that's difficult. Yeah. Takes a lot of exploration. Yeah. That's a problem that I've had, right? Try to logic and rationalize your way through it, and that usually doesn't work because your emotions doesn't care about your logic. Sucks. Lasma says that would be a good time to begin reflect on it. Yeah, depression, yeah. Good time for meditation. Indeed. Anxiety, good time for taking some deep breaths and just, what the fuck is going on? And try to figure it out. Indeed, I agree. Alright, but now it is lunchtime. I'm happy with my choice and I'm looking forward to reading more about it tomorrow. We'll see where it goes. Alright, so thanks for hanging out, and yeah, have a good rest of your day, evening, night, and see you next time. Cheers!